Aloha from the Hawaii Ant Lab. My name is Heather Forrester, and this is Alison Wagner. We're the extension team at the Hawaii Ant Lab, and we really miss your smiling faces at the events that we used to go to. Hopefully you guys are all staying safe and keeping busy during these strange times. Today we're going to be talking about little fire ants. We're going to go over the biology so we understand the monsters that we're dealing with. We're also going to look at survey and identification, so you know where these monsters are. And then finally, integrated pest management, how to kill them. So Alison, take it away.
All right, here we go. So, like Heather said, we want to learn about these monsters. All right, little fire ants. So if you're here, if you clicked on this thinking that you were looking for some other pests, sorry, we're talking about little fire ants, but you can still stay and join us. So who the hell is Hal? Heather mentioned that we were both members of the Hawaii Ant Lab. And I just wanted to give you some of our information. If you ever need to give us a phone call, we have a Hilo office and a West Side office, as well as an office on Oahu. But have a few more people working on the Hilo side, so it's okay to call the Hilo office for anything you might need. Someone is always there to answer a phone, even though we're still all working from home. And we do have this website, so if you have internet access, hopefully you do because you're watching this video on the internet. This is a great resource, this website, for all sorts of information about little fire ants. So I'll take you to it now. So this is our website. It was newly redesigned in October of last year. So it's a lot more user friendly. So basically anything that you would need to know about little fire ants is on this site. All of our resources, all the handouts that we ever give out at any of our booths, if you've ever been to them, or any presentation work. Basically all the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today. Everything, and then other ants in Hawaii as well. So if you have questions about other ants, we're the place to talk to as well. We also have a free ant management class that is on Zoom as well. So especially it's designed and geared for homeowners on the Big Island. So those of us who have to manage these ants for ourselves, and we're not on other islands where you can be part of an eradication project. But this right here, these two sections is probably the meat and potatoes of this website. This is the how to survey, so how to find them to make sure you have them, or if you're bringing new stuff in to test for them, and then how to treat them. So basically, if you forget everything in our presentation today, you can come back to this website, and this survey section and intro is what I'm talking about today, and the treating is what Heather's talking about later. So, Ant Lab. We are a program of the university. We have a few different things that we do in our mission statement. So first and foremost, we want to protect Hawaii from new intentional and unintentional introductions of invasive ants. So no ants are native to Hawaii, and pretty much all the introductions have been unintentional. People aren't necessarily bringing them to do some sort of project with or to help with anything. We've just accidentally brought a lot of them. And there are worse ants out there in the world. So we don't want any new ants to be coming in. Again, they're not native to Hawaii, so anything new can be potentially harmful in a new environment. So we also want to prevent the inter and intra-island spread of these ants. So there are other invasive ants on these different islands. Big Island probably has the worst, most amount of ants, or the worst problem. And but that doesn't mean that the other islands are excluded from preventing that spread. That's why we do surveys at ports of entry and other places like that, because we don't want these ants hitchhiking rides on cargo or things like that onto other islands, being brought over by people, spreading these ants further. So that's one of the things that we do. To me, one of the biggest, most important things we do is the research and extension work to provide sound, practical treatment methods for homeowners, natural resource managers, and industry. We're the ones that if a new product comes out on the market, we test to see, okay, is it going to work for our little fire ants in our environment? So what works for one ant, we'll talk about later, isn't going to work for another. And we have to keep in mind that we're in a special place on the planet. So we want to make sure that it'll work for our ants in our environment. Because again, what, happens in Florida or China or whoever, Japan or other places where there are different ants, we want to make sure that we know how to deal with our ants. And then the other big thing that we do is we work on eradications of new incursions wherever possible. So on other islands, if you're not on Hawaii Island, there are a lot of eradication projects that go on because you can find the edge of a population in a community or on one location, and we can get around it and treat it to eradicate it. So that's really important. Our funding comes from lots of different places. So we have the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, contributions from HDOA, other competitive grants. So we're constantly scrambling for money every year to make sure that we're still available as a resource for all of you. And we just want to acknowledge that everything that we do couldn't be possible without working with our collaborators. So places like the Invasive Species Council, invasive species committees on each island, Hawaii Department of Ag on each island, and community members that work with us. Really, any project we work on can't be completed without collaborating with others. Because even though the Hawaii Ant Lab, we're a small group of people, but we have to deal with all invasive ants for the entire state. So it could be a little overwhelming at times. So I already took you to our website. It's a great resource. I highly recommend checking it out. And it's a great place to go to also delve a little deeper. And then if you have questions, all of our contact emails are on there. So you can contact Heather or myself, or just email to the info@littlefireants.com for questions, or call us. And we're available to answer anything as it comes up. And no question is too small or too little or too whatever. Most likely somebody else has asked it and we have an answer for you. And if you have a new question, we'd love to hear it, because we're always wanting to find out new ways to help people. So LFA 101, it's really important. Heather called them monsters, right? And they're also invaders, things like that. Really got to think about them as like the enemy. They are the bad guys in the situation. And if you're going to go to war with these insects, we want to make sure we understand them. So that's why we have to get to know them a little bit. And I know creepy crawlers, gross, but it's really important to know them to be able to kill them most effectively or prevent them from getting onto your property. So not all fire ants are created equally. So fire ant just means an ant that causes a fiery burn or sting when they sting you. And there's lots of different species of fire ants out there. We only have 2 species of fire ants in the whole state, and that's these 2 here, the tropical fire ant and the little fire ant. But we actually have over 60 species of ants totally in the state. And again, none of them are native. None of them are supposed to be here. But all these ants are basically running around doing all sorts of things, and some are just worse than others. So tropical fire ants have been around for a really long time. And a lot of people, they call them red ants. They are really aggressive. They run up your leg if you're at like a picnic outside. They have small little mounds that they form, and they bite you and they sting the heck out of you. And really just a nuisance ant. And if you've ever been stung by one, you would probably be like, well, that's got to be an invasive ant. But actually, they don't cause as many problems overall in our grand scheme of things compared to little fire ants. So little fire ants, not only are they stinging us, but they're also a pest to agriculture, to animals, to all sorts of things. They're doing a lot more damage to the environment and to our way of life than these ants ever did. The ant over on the right-hand side is called a red imported fire ant. This is an ant that if you Google how to kill fire ants, 90% of the time, it's going to take you to how to kill red imported fire ants. You might see cool YouTube videos of people pouring molten aluminum into mounds, or people are spraying all sorts of things into the ground. That's to treat red imported fire ants. And we don't have those on Hawaii, thankfully. But they are billion-dollar industry effectors. They put people in the hospital. They can kill people. And they're something that you find more invading the southeastern and southern parts of the United States. And so a lot of the products that Heather will talk about later are actually designed for this ant. And that's why the Ant Lab, we come along and say, okay, we're going to look at this product that's designed for fire ants and try to use it on our little fire ants. That's kind of like this weird bridge between. So highly invasive, big pest ant, but these ants are very strange in the way that they actually live in the trees and on the ground. So if you were treating, say, the tropical fire ant or Rifa, you would actually treat them very differently because you'd only have to put something on the ground. And a lot of these ants only have a single queen and different other nesting and behaviors, right? Different biologies. Whereas we're looking here today at little fire ants, we have to treat and understand the biology of little fire ants to be most effective with them in both, again, preventing them and also treating them. So little fire ants, we know they're native to Central and South America. They're considered one of the world's top 100 most invasive species. In Central and South America, they reproduce in different ways. They have like a non-invasive morph that has one queen and separate nests and everyone kind of whatever. And they do have an invasive morph like we do here, where lots of queens, lots of nests, all built on top of each other. But again, in Central and South America, they have some other worse ants or things that kind of sometimes keep them in check. But we don't have those things here, and we don't want to bring those things here and make things worse. So we have to learn how they work in order to use their biology against them, basically. So a lot of people ask, like, how did we get these ants? How did they first get here? So they were first detected in 1999 in Lower Puna, and most likely introduced in some sort of plant trade from Florida, because we do know that ants we have here are genetically identical to ants that are invaded in Florida. But when we detected them in 1999, somebody thankfully brought it to the Department of Ag and said, what are these ants? But unfortunately, they had already been here for a long time. They had already established a lot, hadn't been moved around in the nursery industry and by people. So it's very difficult to eradicate a species that's already kind of taken a foothold in a place. But that is their origin story, basically. And since then, they have been moved to other islands. And that's why other islands do have eradication projects going on, because they have been moved around by people. So these ants, we call them hitchhiker ants, and they pretty much move as far and as fast as humans can take them. So, 55 miles per hour in the back of your truck, 300 miles per hour in a plane. I'm not sure how many nautical miles per hour a boat goes, but pretty much we are responsible for moving these ants around. And again, mostly unintentionally, but it is our both our communal fault, but also our communal responsibility to stop the spread of these ants. So a little bit of biology about these ants. So this description is very generic. So don't think just because it fits this description, it's definitely a fire ant. We'll talk about survey later and identification. It's always important to mail it in to double check, because there are some lookalikes. But the general description is a uniform reddish brown color ant that's really tiny, about as long as a penny is wide, and relatively slow moving. So again, what that means to me might be a little bit different to you. So it's always best to get those specimens double checked by somebody with experience in fire ants, or in identifying insects at least. And then again, these ants are special. They have different nesting habits than most other ants. So they nest in warm, moist, shady places, and they nest in the trees and on the ground. That's pretty unusual, the tree part, which is very different than other ants. And part of why, when they were first detected, the county and the state only had ability to treat the ground, right? They only had things to treat the ground. And if you can't treat the trees, then you're only getting rid of half the problem. So that's part of why the Ant Lab was founded and created, was to find ways to treat the ants in the trees, especially in our very wet environment in Hawaii. And again, they kind of think about them like just people moving into condos. They don't make their own homes. They don't dig nests and how you imagine, ant farms back in the day, or have these little tunnels that they build. They don't do this kind of stuff. They just move into any crack, crevice, nook and cranny, that exists that can kind of retain a little bit of moisture and keep them shady. So that could be leaf axils, that can be all the loose potting media in a potted plant, but it also could be something like lumber that's been stacked for a long period of time, or roofing tiles that have been stacked somewhere in an infested area. All those little spaces is a place for these ants to move in, move away, or rubbish or anything like that. Like lots of ready-made homes for them. And then really important to note, colonies are small and numerous with multiple queens. So other ants will have one queen and they kind of will compete with the same species, right? You have nest A and nest B, and they kind of live a little bit of ways because they don't want to compete too much for food and water. But these ants, they have multiple queens and they're all related. They're all genetically related. So nest A and B could be right next to each other, and ants can go between these nests because they're all sisters. They're all related. So think about your big happy family living close to each other. It's not like having a neighbor that's kind of humbug next to you, like, oh, I don't really talk to neighbor over there. They are complete and utter friends and support each other. So that's another reason why they get kind of so out of control so quickly. There's just so many ants. They naturally spread through what's called budding. So in other ant species, like all female and male ants, all of the reproductives, like the queens and the kings, whatever you want to call them, they're born with wings. And a lot of ants will do what's called a nuptial flight, and they fly up together, they mate, and these ants only have to mate once. A queen only has to mate once with a male, and she's fertile for life. They do their little mating thing, and then she flies somewhere else to go start a new nest. But again, these ants are all genetically related, so they don't have to do that. They can just do their thing and then move right next door. They'll actually piggyback some workers on their back. A queen will mate, she'll become fertile, piggyback some workers, and move right next door. So it's called budding. So they really don't spread very fast on their own. It's, again, us that's spreading them really quickly by picking up those colonies and moving them around and just making it kind of spread out of control even faster. It's kind of like when you get like, something on your hand and then you look around and you're like, oh my God, where did I get this ink from on my hand? I've spread it so many places, and you realize how much, we've probably all done that with coronavirus now, washing our hands so much, realize how much stuff you actually touch. So it's very much like that, just budding and spreading out of control. And because they're all interconnected, they're all related, we call that a big 3D super colony. So it'll be high as trees and wide as wherever they want to go, just three-dimensionally spreading in their environment, living as one big happy family. So what probably most people are familiar with is them being a pest of humans and animals, right? If they are bothering us, if they are stinging us, they are making themselves known. So again, LFA, they're not aggressive at first towards us, but what happens is they get trapped in our clothes. This is a good picture right here. You can see where this person's collar was, is where most of their stings are, right? So they get trapped in our clothes, they feel threatened, they start to sting us. They're actually injecting us with a protein that we're having a histamine reaction to. And so for some people, it's a really severe reaction. Like we've had lots of reports of people going to the doctor, hospital, and trying to get some relief from that. And then for some people, it's not as bad of a reaction. So again, it just all depends on a person's immune response to this situation. So it could vary on the amount of stings. There's just so much variability, but we do know that when they sting, it is causing a fiery burn, which is why their general name is fire ants. And you have a histamine reaction to it. So usually you develop a welt that has some itching that lasts for a certain amount of days. But it makes outdoor activities really unenjoyable. A lot of people, they have difficulty even gardening in their backyards because they're getting so attacked. They can't even pick the fruit from the trees that they planted years ago. When you do pick the fruit or you go to trim the trees, LFA, they're raining down on you. And so you're getting down into your shirt, into your clothes, and just making your life miserable. And then in a lot of cases, when there's so many ants outside, they start to come inside to people's homes looking for food and water. And then now you don't even have the relief of staying inside your home to be away from these insects. They're actually coming inside, stinging people in their beds, in their couches and in their kitchens, all sorts of places. So really unpleasant situation. A lot of people, if the ants don't necessarily bother them, they get upset because the ants are actually harming their pets and livestock. So they'll tend to forage around pet food, which is really delicious to these ants. And they'll sting these pets. They'll cause rashes, and the animals will scratch and get little bald spots. But probably one of the scarier ones is they could potentially cause blindness in these pets, especially pets that you're kind of keeping on your property and you're feeding them with these bowls that they could, the insects will crawl on their snouts. When they blink, they get trapped in their eyes. The ants freak out and they start stinging the pet's eyes. So again, we're not sure how this happens or why, but pretty much where there are lots of little fire ants, there are these pets with these clouded corneas. So we're not sure if it's like the sting that's causing it or if they're introducing bacteria. We just don't know. But we do know that it makes pets and humans' lives miserable. And probably what you guys are really interested in is how does it affect agriculture? We know that these pests can be the thing that make or break a farm. Like we know that they could put farms out of business. They've done that. They spread plant disease. So these ants, just like people, they need food and water. And some of the food, just like people, they need sugars, proteins, and fats to survive. In their habitat, they get a lot of these sugars from these homopteran insects. So aphids and scale and mealybugs, a lot of them produce these honeydew excretions. So it's like a sugary substance that comes out of them. And the ants love it. And they will actually farm these plant pests to get that stuff. So just like we do with cattle and we move them around, they'll do that with plant pests. They'll protect them from other insects. They'll move them to uninfected parts of the plant to give them a nice, happy place to grow. And so all of that is causing plant diseases, increased sooty mold buildup, stunted growth of plants, premature fruit excision, and just fruit spoilage as well. So they're already affecting your crop output. But imagine having lower crop output and people not wanting to pick the fruit to begin with, right? We have lots of cases that we hear of workers just doing maybe 1 or 2 days of work and then not showing up after that because they can't deal with the amount of stings. We hear a lot of people in different industries saying the pickers will not come back until we have told them we have treated for ants. And we have some proof of that because it's so miserable for the people working out there. And then for all of you, it's also added pest control costs, right? So not only are you fighting all these other plant pests, but now you have these ants that are affecting 2 different parts, right? Miserable work environment and spreading disease, you have to treat for them as well. So really frustrating. Or even if you don't treat in the fields for them, you have to do something to make sure that what you're exporting is ant-free. Because if you try and put a box of fruit on a plane, the Department of Ag is going to inspect that. And if they find 1 single ant, it's not going to go. So either way, it's going to add a lot of pest controlling of some version of costs. So the best thing to do would be to try to avoid getting them all together if you can, which is a possibility with the prevention stuff. So the next part, we're going to learn a little bit more about these ants, and our boss loves this little cartoon here. But the idea is that once you understand the colony structure and the behavior of social insects, so just like bees, ants are social insects, you can see certain treatment methods just don't work. So this image here is a guy, he's just blasting his yard with a machine gun, and she's like, oh, he's just spraying the lawn for insects, right? That's not the most effective way to treat for ants. For other plant pests might be the way, but not for social insects like ants. And we'll talk about that next. But it's always a funny comic to look at. So colony structure. All right, so we talked about this being a 3D, like a super colony, right? Think about it as like a super organism. When you're fighting these ants, if they are on your property, it's not just a little home of ant here and there. The whole thing, think about the movie The Blob. The whole thing is a big old blob trying to take over your property, right? Since they're budding, it's just the blob is slowly, slowly, slowly getting bigger. And so we want to make sure that we understand that, right? We know they're not flying to a new space. We know that they're moving around because we're moving them. And we know that if we want to treat them, we want to know where the edge of the blob is, right? We also know they have multiple queens. So they are reproducing much more quickly than other ant species because each nest can have up to half a dozen queens. Each of those queens is producing X amount of eggs a day. They are really increasing their numbers very quickly. Again, we mentioned the males, they're only needed for reproduction and they die. So that queen only needs to be mated once and she's fertile for life and she could pump out eggs the rest of her life. All the workers are female. The workers that you see is about 10% or so, 10 to 14% of the population, the total population of that colony. So very few ants are actually out foraging, but those are the ones you really experience, right? The rest are back home tending to take care of the queens and the eggs and all sorts of stuff. And the way these workers they basically walk around looking for food and water. They're all set on different little missions to find whatever resources are needed for the colony, right? And they literally just wander around. They're very slow moving, so they wander as far as they need to for food and water. And they're not, don't think of them like a shark that they could smell that peanut butter from a mile away. They literally have to bump into something to taste it with their little antenna, sense what it is to see if it's something they want, and then they tell their friends. So that's really important to note, is that they're called bump and find feeders. These ants are just out and about looking for food, and they actually are liquid feeders, so they suck out the oils of different things and then go back home and share it by, the professional way to call it is trophallaxis, but they throw it up and share it with their friends. So that's how they share their food and resources. But again, those workers are the older, more expendable ants because that foraging for food is really risky behavior for ants. Not all of them make it back. You know, there's chickens and all sorts of other obstacles out there in the world. So basically, if the 10% don't make it back, she's got 90% back home to send out another 10% the next day. So that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind too when you listen to Heather's part later. And then lastly, in case you're wondering what larvae are, they include infant workers, new queens, and males. So this little picture up here, you can see that there's some lighter little eggs there. And then there's a larger white blob in the center. And that's probably a reproductive, probably a queen egg that these ants are tending to. Because when they get to a certain point, they pump out a new queen and send her on her way. But you can see all these workers here tending to all these little eggs in this nest. And imagine every day, you know, new ants are just being born constantly every single day. So now that we understand a little bit about these ants, we know that they make a lot of babies. They need to forage for food and water. We know that there's a lot of them and that the ants can exchange between nests, right? The nests are all working together and to form one super colony. Now we want to know, or this is the way to find out where they are, right? So since we understand that they're looking for food and they're looking for resources, the best way to find out where they are is to leave some food out. So a misconception is that if I put out this peanut butter stick, ants from my neighbor's yard are going to come over here. Again, they travel very slow and, you know, they don't go very far. So really, this is to find the ants on your property, right? Or to find ants that are on something you want to bring onto your property. So when I talk about survey, think about it in two ways. You can think about it as, how do I find out what's going on my property or my farm? And how do I find out what's going on something I want to bring to my farm, right? If I need to bring things on, let me check it before I bring it because I don't want to spread these ants, right? So prevention. So survey methods, and we're going to watch a video that'll recover this later if you're more of a visual person. But basically all you need is some creamy peanut butter. If you're allergic to peanuts, you can use mayonnaise or like cat food, something like that. But you pretty much thin smear on a stick, put it in a shady, moist area, wait an hour, come back to it. Excuse me. If you come back to it and there's ants on it, you take that little stick, put it in a plastic bag, zip it up, put it in a freezer at least overnight, 24 hours, and send it in for identification. So let's watch a video so you can see how this works. Oh.
Carvalho. I'm an invasive.
Let's see if we can get the video to play properly. And if you want to rewatch this, we have links to this video on our website.
Hello, my name is Domingo Carvalho. I'm an invasive species biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Office here in Honolulu, Hawaii, at the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office. The little fire ant continues to be a big problem on the big island of Hawaii and continues to move on various commodities, things like agricultural products, cut flowers, fruits and vegetables, and even construction materials. So we need to remain vigilant. We need to make sure that in our community and in our family residences that we don't have the little fire ant. We need your assistance to find the little fire ant in your backyard. There are simple things around your house that you can utilize, things like a wooden chopstick, a Ziploc bag, and a ruler. And of course, utilizing some peanut butter for surveillance. Looking for little fire ants in your backyard is real easy. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. Take your wooden chopstick, separate it, and just break it in half like this. Next step would be to take one end of the chopstick and put it into your peanut butter. After you're done dipping it, make sure you smear off the excess so that you have just a thin smear on your stick. And then place them into your plants or potted plants or walkways in a very shaded and moist areas, because little fire ant requires those types of environments. Anyway, this is what you don't want to have, so you can have this for lunch, but you want this to be the difference. This is the way that you want to do it. After your peanut butter sticks are readied, you can place them either in plants in moist, shady areas, or you can put them on the ground at the base of plants where there might be little fire ant located. But again, it would be in a location that is in a moist or dark area, shaded area, as well as leaving it for 30 to 60 minutes for the detection of any little fire ant that might be in the area. After about 60 minutes, go back to the location that you dropped your peanut butter stick and picked it up and look at it very carefully. Make sure that you don't get stung by any ants that might be there. If there are ants located because they are attracted to the bait, place them carefully into the Ziploc bag and seal it up immediately. Place the bag into a freezer and leave it there for at least 24 hours to kill any ants that might be in there, and mail it in to the address listed. Do your part to protect your community and your family. By all means, do the surveys for little fire ant. Do it annually or when you have new plant material that come onto your property, whether it be a potted plants or new planting material. Do your part to protect your island from the little fire ant. If you have further questions or you need any additional information, please contact your local Department of Agriculture office on your island or your local invasive species committee. Thank you.
So I think that video is a really good example of how to survey on a private property, right? Your residential property. I'd like to point out that he made sure to note that it's not just surveying, your property where the ants may be right now, but also surveying new things you bring onto your property. So we're going to kind of talk about that. So again, we use the survey method for two different reasons. One is getting a snapshot in time of what's going on your property, right? Do you already have ants on your property? Are there ants coming in from a neighbor's line? What's going on your property? But you can also use a survey as a snapshot in time for materials you're about to bring onto the property. And Heather will talk more in detail about what quarantining is. But basically, before you release these new materials, whatever it might be, potted plants, mulch, cinder, lumber, whatever it might be, bringing it onto your property and using it, you want to double check it before you spread it. Because again, as a reminder, these are hitchhiker ants. And so if I were to get mulch and put it at every one of these trees, I might be spreading LFA, and it had LFA in it. Might be spreading LFA throughout this entire orchard. Whereas if I were to just put it in one place for a period of time, check it, survey it before I spread it, I might be able to deal with the problem there before I spread it. And same thing if you're harvesting stuff and you want to move fruit or produce or vegetables, whatever it is you're harvesting, you don't want to take ants from one place and move it to another place. You want to check that. So this here is an example of a survey. That's a survey of the property itself. And we recommend doing survey every 3 to 6 months if you are in prevention mode. So say you did your first survey and you don't detect fire ants. Every 3 to 6 months is a good routine. Every 3 months is even better, right? That way, if something new pops up, ants start to come in from an area, or something that maybe got missed over time, like a smaller population that's just starting, might not be detected on your first survey until it gets a little bigger. It's a lot better to deal with a little corner of ants than it is to deal with an orchard full of ants. So that's why we recommend doing the property surveys every 3 to 6 months or so. So at least twice a year, because again, these ants aren't being spread by themselves. They're not getting out of control by themselves as much as by people moving them. So if you do detect them 3 months from now, they will not have spread to like an uncontrollable entire property's worth of problem. With surveying, especially with large areas, those of you that are dealing with large acreage, you want to be as systematic as possible. So here's an example of surveying through an orchard. You're going to walk down one row and just alternate trees that you're going to put them on. And you can decide if it's a very systematic, very young orchard. Maybe it's, everything's planted perfectly. You can go every 2 trees or whatever you decide. Sometimes with more mature orchards or other places, trees have been removed, things have kind of moved over time. Maybe you decide you want to do it in steps, right? Every 20 steps, I'm going to put down a stick and I'm going to go to the left and then to the right and to the left and to the right. As long as you are keeping track of where you're putting them down so you can easily come back to it, that's what's most important when you're doing a large amount of area. And notice that in this example, the person's gone down one row and alternated and skipped a couple rows and gone up the other row, right? So you're getting a good understanding of what's going on this property without putting in too much time and effort. So pretty much as fast as you can walk that property is about as fast as you're going to survey that property. The time consuming part comes after, when you come back to, not very time consuming, but you come back to pick up, right? If you detect ants, you're going to want to put that stick in the plastic bag and label that bag. A lot of farms will have a system that they use, right? This is orchard A, this is row 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever system works for you. That's how you want to label it, right? So if you're like, I know I'm in row 1 in my citrus orchard, and I'm going to label this stick 1, 2, 3. You can also print out a map from Google Earth and kind of draw it up a little bit to get a good idea. Because what happens is you're going to label that bag with some words that make sense to you to be able to find that place again, right? If it's a small property, it could be the avocado tree or the northwest corner of my yard or whatever it might be. If it's a larger property, you do have to come up with something that makes sense to you, right? Row A, tree number 5, whatever it might be. That way, when you mail these samples in and somebody calls you back and says, this is fire ants or this is not fire ants, say I call you back and I'm like, oh, fire ants were in row A, tree 1, 2, and 3. Then you know exactly where they were, versus if you just mail in sticks with no knowledge of where you put them. And I say, oh, 3 out of the 50 bags you sent me had fire ants. There's no way for you to go back and figure out where the ants were. So this step is pretty important for somebody to call you back and say, the bag that you labeled blank is where fire ants were. That way you can go right back to that area, create a little buffer zone, and kill those ants. And this example here, this little insert, is something that's what they did, right? So there's this little stream beds here, some fire ants were detected. This area here, they created a buffer around it, and they're like, this is where we're going to kill the ants. You can also use this as, this is where we're really going to more thorough survey, right? I know they're here, but how far out are they really? So let me test more here. Let me test more here. They want to find the edge of the ants here, so you can find the edge of where you want to treat. So in this example, I believe it was, these are the ants, this is our treatment buffers kind of thing. So same concept here. If I were to go through and I only find ants in these first 5 stars, I'm going to only treat an area that includes those 5 stars and a buffer around it to make sure that we really deal with the ants. And that's why this survey is so important, is because if there are ants only in one little part of the property, it's a lot better, a lot cheaper for you to only treat those ants. And say you're the kind of person that you have been experiencing these ants, right? Oh, I know that I get stung in this corner of the orchard. If you just only assume that they're there and you only treat that corner, you might miss a bunch of other patches of ants and let them get out of control. And you've again wasted time and money. So if you are suspicious of these ants, or you might be experiencing them right now, it's important to just do that survey first, come up with a plan. And Heather will talk about integrated pest management and making plans. The survey is the most important, fundamental, basic part of that survey of the property. First, know where your enemy is. And then if you are investing time and money in treating, you don't want to bring new ants on while you're treating, right? So that's where the second part of the survey is, testing those things that you're going to bring on. Or if you are so lucky not to have ants in the first place, we know that we're the ones that move them around. And so using that survey to test things before you move them, that's how you prevent them. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it seems really silly, and a lot of people have the misconception it's inevitable, they're going to come, but it's really not inevitable. It only is if you're choosing to just ignore it. And it is like a simple little thing. It's just peanut butter on a stick. So what is it? They call it simple, not easy. I know you guys have a lot of stuff that you're doing, and it's an added task, but it could prevent a lot of pain in the future. So once you've done this, right, you go through and you do this survey. Another important thing to note is if you have 20-acre farm and you send us 5 sticks, that's not a very good picture of what's going on your property, right? So you could see a lot of sticks, more sticks the merrier. And again, don't overdo it, because we know that you have a million other tasks to do on your properties. But the more sticks that you can put out, the better idea of what you're going to get about your property, right? What's going on your property. You get a little clearer picture. So any stick that has a suspicious ant, right? We talked about if it's small, if it's reddish, orange, if it's slow moving, but even if you just don't really know what that ant is, right? You're just interested, what kind of ant is this? Or you're not really comfortable saying, is it a suspect, yes or no? Just mail it in. So when in doubt, mail it out. Let some nerd with a microscope double check it for you, because again, better safe than sorry. So whatever sticks that you have ants on it that you want to consider as suspects or want to know what they are, you're going to freeze them overnight. Make sure they're dead. We're not going to mail live ants. And you're going to mail them in to, if you want to mail them directly to the Hawaii Ant Lab, I suggest the Hilo address here, 16 East Lanikaula Street. If you're on other islands and you'd rather drop it off or mail it over to a local location, you're welcome to do that. The Hawaii Department of Agriculture buildings on each island is a great place to leave these insects, because they'll get checked by somebody that is familiar with identifying ants and insects in general. But make sure that you bring them in dead. So make sure that you put them in the freezer at least overnight. and leave them in the freezer until you're ready to mail them or bring them in. If you put them in the freezer and then take them out and let them sit for a month, they might get too moldy and nobody can identify the ant for you. So do the survey when you can, and then send in the samples when you can, but just let them sit in the freezer for a while if it's going to be a couple days or a week or two before you mail it. And I will just personally ask that and remind that, because if you've ever smelled rotten, moldy peanut butter and ant mixture, it's pretty disgusting. So please don't mail that in. Mail in the fresh ants when you're ready. What we're looking at, this is something that you can practice on your own, but I would still say, even if you have a microscope and you can look at these features, mail in reference samples just to double check your work, because some of the lookalikes, this little feature right here, these two clubs, this third one could look really small, and it could look like it has 3 clubs, and you can either misidentify it as not a fire ant or misidentify the lookalike that has 3 clubs as a fire ant. So until you really build an understanding of how to ID ants, send them into the Department of Agriculture, the Hawaii Ant Lab, or an invasive species committee to double check for you. And because what we're looking for is 2 clubs on their antenna, 2 spines, and 2 petioles here, and also this teardrop shaped eye. And again, the lookalikes are called that for a reason. Not only do they look alike to fire ants with the naked eye, they can even be really similar under the microscope, where the spines are a little shorter, but they have 3 clubs instead of 2, or maybe they have 1 petiole, or little tiny features. And again, this is a really tiny ant under a microscope. So unless you're really familiar with it and have a really high powered microscope, you can lead yourself astray on this. So easy enough to just mail it in to an expert and let them look at it. And as long as you include contact information, we'll call you back and let you know what they are. It's especially important to mail it in, I'll just add this, especially important to mail in stuff to the neighbor islands where they are working on eradication projects, because on some of the neighbor islands, there's only a few spots where there are fire ants, and you could be the first one that's reporting a new spot, and you could help stop the spread of fire ants in your neighborhood or on your farm. So that is like extremely critical. Don't think about it like I'm going to get in trouble for finding a fire ant. Think about it like you're doing yourself and everyone around you a favor. I want to show you guys this website before I go, because I do think it's important for us on the neighbor islands. So I'm here in Hilo on Hawaii Island. And so how we deal with our fire ants on Hawaii Island is very different than the other islands. So because they're so far gone here, eradication is just not possible on this particular island. But if you're on any of the other islands, you can go to this stoptheant.org. So every October is actually the state declared it's Spot the Ant, Stop the Ant month. And you can check in on any island. So if we want to say, okay, let's check out what's going on Oahu, it'll actually give you an update on where there have been eradication projects. Are there any active? So you can see right now there's a lot active projects, and that's because of people like us that are interested in ants, and they hear about an ad or do whatever, they send in a stick and it has a positive ant on it, and they basically have helped all these different neighborhoods, help with eradications. But it all starts with a person reporting an ant, finding an ant, doing a survey, reporting it. And you could see here, places that are in monitoring phase means that we're just checking to see if ants are there, if they pop back up. So if they're in a monitoring phase, they're not being treated anymore, but we still want to check up and make sure, like, okay, did the treatments work? And we'll keep monitoring for a long time before it's declared as eradicated. But another important thing to note is at the bottoms of a lot of these pages, you'll have contact information for your local invasive species committee or your local Hawaii Department of Ag. So again, if you don't want to mail it to Hilo, say you're on Kauai and you want to mail it to someone on Kauai or drop it off if they are open and accepting visitors, this is the website to find that pertinent information. And a lot of this area too, like they will post where you can find test kits that a lot of the invasive species committees give out free test kits that have sticks and instructions already on them. So it's a really useful page. So this page here, littlefireants.com and stoptheant.org are probably your two best digital resources for little fire ants. So because we don't have any more questions, because we are recording this, I will pass this over to Heather, and she will let you know how to quarantine things. So again, we talked about surveys. She'll let you know how to quarantine, and she will also let you know how to kill them if you find them.
Thank you, Allison. So if you find that you do have little fire ant, don't lose hope. They are manageable. We do so through using the techniques in integrated pest management. This is a multi-pronged approach where we look at prevention, sanitation, mechanical control, as well as chemical control. And I'll be going over those for today. At the Hawaii Ant Lab, our goal is to provide the least toxic options that are safe for you, your family, your pets, as well as the environment. Allison talked a lot about the importance of prevention. You really need to be aware of what you're bringing onto your property. Some high-risk items include landscape materials, mulch, potted plants, cinder, but little fire ants can be moved around on more common items. Say you have a sprouted coconut you got from a friend or a pineapple you picked up at a farmer's market. All it takes is one fertile queen and several workers to hitch a ride in the crown of a pineapple. You twist the top off, put it in the ground or in your mulch pile, and that could be spreading a new infestation of little fire ants. So one way you can combat that is to set up a quarantine area. This is an open area of your yard or property that you can put a chemical barrier treatment around, and we'll talk about options for that in a donut. And then that way, placing any items that you're quarantining within that, so that if there are little fire ants and they try to escape, then they'll be stopped by that barrier. So they won't be able to spread to your property. The pictures that I have here have a bench with potted plants. One thing that people will do to prevent ants from crawling up the legs of the table is to put a tuna can or some type of a can with a soapy water in it. And what that soapy water does is it breaks the surface tension. Ants can actually float right across fresh water, but if you put the soap, they'll fall in and drown that way. So if you have a single potted plant, for example, you can set up something as simple as this soapy water moat. How long do you hold these items in your quarantine area? Well, that's going to depend on what it is. So something small like a potted plant on the bench doesn't need to be quarantined as long as, say, these larger ferns. Also, if you're transporting larger items, the jostling of the movement, and if you water the plant as soon as you get it onto the property, those things are going to make the ants hunker down and hide out. And when you're monitoring using that chopstick method with the peanut butter, they might not come out at first. So you would want to hold these items in your quarantine area for longer amounts of time. So with quarantining, it's all about containing, monitoring, and treating, if necessary, any items that you're bringing onto your property. If you do find that an item has little fire ants, we always recommend that you return it to where it came from. Because say you purchase something at a nursery, your dollar is going to impact how they carry out their business. If their plants are being returned, hopefully the vendor will do something about it. Next is sanitation and mechanical control. The idea here is to reduce the nesting habitat of the ants, so that when you come along with your chemical control, it'll be more effective. So these controls include things like cleaning up rubbish. Even something like nested pots, empty nested pots, can create a great space for little fire ants to hide out in. We've seen the movement of roofing tiles to Maui as a home for little fire ants, and fortunately, they were discovered and weren't allowed to start up a new infestation there. So cleaning up things like that around your property. Pruning trees and vegetation is another way to reduce the habitat. A lot of times we may have these beautiful old growth trees, maybe a mango, and it has a bunch of vines going up the trunk. That creates a really great habitat for little fire ants. So if it's possible to remove those vines or thick moss, that's a good way to reduce the habitat as well. In a heavily infested area, if you pull back a patch of moss from the tree, you can see an entire colony there with multiple queens. One colony can fit within the size of a macadamia nut shell. So just something to keep in mind. Removing leaf litter, slash, and mulch until you get the little fire ant problem under control is another strategy. So all of these are just suggestions. When it comes to reality, you may or may not be able to do these things, such as if you have mulch at the base of your fruit trees, you want that there to hold in the moisture. And if you have a huge orchard, you're not likely to go remove all of these mulch piles. But just know that that's going to be a stronghold for the ants if you're not able to remove it. Same thing with if you have mulch piles or green waste piles around your property, those may remain hotspots for the little fire ants throughout your treatment. So keep that in mind and monitor those areas more often to see if the ants are still holding on there. Here on Big Island, one of the issues used to be that we would take our green waste to the transfer stations and it would get chipped up and spit out, and people were at the bottom of the hill shoveling it into the back of their trucks. That may have been a way that the little fire ants were spread. Now, and for several years, we've been working with the county, and they will put that green waste and let it sit in windrows to heat up the material to kill off the ants. And they also make sure that they're treating any ants on the property so that it is not an issue. We do surveys every month at the green waste facilities where you could pick up this mulch. And remember, though we're not seeing little fire ants, nothing in life is a guarantee. So if you do choose to pick up mulch, I would recommend doing that quarantine area, monitoring the material before you spread it throughout the property. Because the worst thing you want to do is, if you don't have little fire ants, bring on a pile of mulch and then spread them throughout the property. That's just a nightmare. Now let's get into chemical control. Pesticides are anything that kill a pest, whether it be a rodenticide killing rodents, insecticide killing insects, fungicide killing fungus. But when it comes down to insecticides, we have three main categories. First off is our contact insecticides. They kill on contact, as the name says. We also have residual or barrier treatments. So these are going to bind to the surface that they're applied to and have a residual effect. These are things that you could use in your quarantine area to prevent ants from escaping. Other times people will use residual barriers or around the perimeter of their homes so that the bugs don't come in. These contacts and residuals are called general insecticides, so they're going to kill more than just ants. That can be great when we're dealing with maybe centipedes that are trying to come into our homes, but there is a downside to it. Some people that will use these general insecticides throughout their yards could be impacting those beneficial insects. At the Hawaii Ant Lab, what we recommend first and foremost is going to be baiting. So baits are an attractive food source that the ants will feed off of. They're liquid feeders, so they suck the liquids out, store it in their crop like a chicken has a crop, take it back to the nest and regurgitate it, sharing it with the queens and the other workers. So we're really using their biology to our advantage. We're making them do the work. It's like that Trojan horse getting breaking through the barrier. Keep in mind that when it comes to pesticides, just because something is labeled organic doesn't make it safe. And some synthetic pesticides, though they may be scary to some, are safer to use. So just make sure that no matter what product you purchase, that you read the label, you wear your personal protective equipment, and always follow the label as well. So the label is the law. With the different pesticides, also keep in mind that some of these are a brand name, and then there's going to be several different products within that brand name. Amdro is a great example. So Amdro is a line of products. So make sure that if that's a bait that you choose to use, that you're using the right one. And I'll talk about that more. So let's first focus on these general insecticides. When should I use them? What are some of their downfalls? So with the general insecticides, they are good for small scale applications. Maybe you have a garden bed that you want to use an organic product on and do a contact to kill off some of the ants. Another pro is they can control a variety of other insects. So then you're using one product that covers a lot of bases. These are good for your quarantine areas, for incoming plants and other materials. And there's a wide variety of options to choose from, whether it be organic or synthetic. The downsides of general insecticides is they're really not practical for large-scale applications. If you try to combat the little fire ant with only a general insecticide, it's going to be like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Another con is that these are non-specific, so they may kill off some of our beneficials. We really don't want to hurt our bees. And they should not be used as a cure-all treatment. Regular and heavy use of general insecticides can accumulate, they can have other side effects, and even have pest resistance. When should you use these barrier treatments? Around the home. So if the ants are coming into your home, you can always put up that barrier around the perimeter. It acts like an electric fence. So when the ants crawl over it, they clean themselves, ingest that poison, and they'll die. The downside to that is that it's not getting back to the nest. And as Alison mentioned earlier, the ants that are out and about foraging are only about 10%. So if you're only using a barrier, you're killing off those older workers. The queen realizes, hey, nobody's bringing me back food. So she sends out another batch of recruits and then ups egg production. So using only a barrier treatment is not the best strategy. Some people also use barriers around their property boundaries. We can't control what our neighbors are or aren't doing. So a lot of times there's frustration from folks because they're doing their best to treat for little fire ants, but hey, my neighbor's not doing anything. The good news is that little fire ants aren't spreading very quickly on their own. So you can monitor the boundary of your property, but some people with smaller lot sizes choose to use a barrier. The main thing to keep in mind with both around the home as well as property boundaries is you need to have an open area to apply this to. If you have overarching branches that the ants can use as highways, they're going to they're going to overpass your barrier and it's not going to be effective. The main place barriers are recommended is in that quarantine area. And again, in this situation though, it's a electric fence that's making sure the ants don't escape. So let's get into baiting now. Baiting is my favorite thing to talk about, and it is going to be your best bet. So first I'll talk about baiting options for the ground, and then we'll talk about baiting options for the trees. Granular baits are corn grit laced in oil, or excuse me, corn grit soaked in oil and laced with a toxicant, and there are different options. We'll go over each of them and talk about some of the pros and cons. Siesta is a great product because it's rain fast, but unfortunately now it's only sold in large 15-pound bag quantities. Because it is a corn grit soaked in oil, if this bag is opened, any of these granules should be used within 2 to 3 months of opening the package. Otherwise, it's going to start to go rancid. And the ants are really picky. So if you're putting out a rancid or spoiled bait, they're not going to be interested in it, so it's not going to be effective. Siesta would be more useful in larger areas because of the bag size. Probate is another option. One of the benefits for probate is that it has no limit on how many times you can use it a year. Whereas Siesta, you can only use 4 times in 1 year. Keeping in mind that when you apply these granular baits, it's typically 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds per acre. Amdro is one of the more common products that you can see at a lot of farm supply stores, Ace Hardware, Home Depot, and Lowe's. It comes in a 1 pound plastic jug. Amdro is what I mentioned earlier, that is a line of products. So you could have a 2 pound black shaker bag that has basically the same label as that 1 pound plastic jug, but they're different formulations. So it's really confusing for the buyer. Make sure that if you choose to use Amdro, that you are looking for the one active ingredient of hydromethalnon, and that's the only active ingredient that it should contain. Another product is Max Force Complete. It is the most expensive per pound of all the baits, but the benefit is that it has a oil, sugar, and protein attractant, and it's labeled for use in nurseries. With Max Force Complete, we do recommend this not only for little fire ants, but it works on other species as well. Do remember that if you have issues with any ants, mail in a sample, ask us to ID it to species, and then we can give you treatment advice for that. Finally, we have Antix and Firefighter. This is a really good new product that came out in the beginning of 2020 for use in Hawaii. The benefit for these are that there are a lot of crops on the label, whereas the other granular baits, you cannot apply it to your edible crops. You would have to stay outside of the drip line. So Antix, Firefighter, these have a lot of tropical fruits on the label, but please do make sure to read the label and make sure that your crop is on there. With all of these baits, again, we want to make sure that we're using fresh bait. If you open a container and smell that the granules have gone rancid, it's not going to be effective. Also, please keep in mind that baits are attractive on their own. Sometimes everybody likes to make things better. Some people will mix it with peanut butter, and all that is doing is candy coating a poison. Again, that's not a legal use to mix it with peanut butter. It's considered a reformulation. So the way that you would apply these granular baits is with a seed spreader. For larger properties, you can purchase a blower, that blows out the granules. Paste throughout the property in a grid pattern, similar to how you would have done your survey. And the hardest part about treating is that, again, this is looking to get these granules spread 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds per acre. So you want to make sure that you're not over applying. If you load in, your pound into the seed spreader and crank it out too fast, you might find that you've treated only half of the property. So be sure to calibrate your equipment. Next is talking about how to get rid of the ants in the trees. The Hawaii Ant Lab has developed a gel bait matrix that we then add in 1 of 2 insecticides to. This gel bait consists mainly of oil, water, xanthan gum, which brings together the oil and water, thickens the mixture so it will stick into the trees. We add in peanut butter as an attractant. It also helps to mask the smell of the pesticides. And then we'll add in one of the insecticides that I'll talk about now. Provon is one option. It's a lethal bait and it's for ornamental foliage only. The downside to Provon is that it's only sold in large containers now, and so it's quite pricey. And we find that a lot of people that are treating for little fire ants on large acreages have a lot of edible crops. So that's not a practical solution for them. So really, when it comes to treating edibles, tropical fruits, and tall trees, we recommend using Tango. Tango is an insect growth regulator. And what it does is, again, the workers are going to feed off of this gel bait and regurgitate it, share it with the queen. It doesn't impact the workers directly. It only impacts the reproduction system of the queen. So the lifespan of little fire ants, queens can live for several years, but the workers are only living about 3 months. And the workers that have already been born are going to die of natural cause. The queen's egg production is going to slow, eventually halt. So she's not going to have the workforce to bring back food to her. She has to go out and forage for herself, and a lot of time is picked off or dies as well. So Tango is a non-lethal bait, and you're not going to see results until about 3 to 4 months of treatments, because that's when the ants that have already been born are dying of natural cause. Again, the queen's not making more babies. So you get a gradual decline with the ant population. It's great, again, because it can be used on the edible crops. This gel bait is the consistency of a gravy, and it's something that you mix up yourself. You're going to apply it to the trunk and the main branches of the tree. Those are like highways for the ants. Some people who choose to use only Tango, they can apply it on the ground as well. It's all about getting a lot of little dots everywhere versus big clumps in certain places. So some ways to apply this, the Zep spray bottle is great for your smaller jobs. If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me, how is this stuff going to go through this spray bottle, I'd be rich. For larger properties, you want to use a piston pump backpack sprayer. The Jacktoe is a great option, one that we use a lot at the lab. And the only modification that needs to be made is a D2 disc that goes onto the tip, and that gives you a nice consistent stream. The fans or mist is not going to work with that thick gel. The application rate for the Hawaii Ant Lab gel bait is going to be 1 to 2 gallons of the mixed product per acre. And that ranges, so if you have an open area on your property, you're going to use the lower range, the 1 gallon per acre. If you're dealing with orchard-like settings, then you're going to want to use the higher 2 gallons per acre. It's really important to clean your equipment. So first we rinse it out with Dawn dish soap or something similar. And then we put a heavy concentration of a degreaser, such as Simple Green, and run it through the line. Because you're dealing with such thick, sticky stuff, you have to make sure that you clean the equipment well so it's not clogging and ruining your equipment. If you take anything out of the treatment portion, it's really these baiting basics. Number one, you want to broadcast your bait according to the label throughout your yard, not only on the ground, but up into the trees. Two, you want to do so on a dry day. Here on Big Island, especially the Hilo side, again, people roll their eyes at us and say it always rains, but you will find 4 to 6 hours of dry weather to treat for your ants. Third, and most important, is you need to reapply every 4 to 6 weeks for at least a 1-year period. In the case of Tango, that typically takes up to 16 to 18 months to really get the ants under control. After the year period, though, you want to survey using the technique that Alison went over and see if you're still detecting ants. If you are, keep treating. You may find that the majority of the property has been cleared of LFA, but they're holding on in some spots. So again, those mulch piles, the crowns of palm trees, those are great places for the ants to live, and they may hold on beyond that 1 year. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is treating for ants, little fire ants, when they see them. So if we look at doing one of the lethal baits, like the granular baits, you have a population of ants and it's an army, and they feed off of your bait, and you have a really drastic decline in the population. A lot of times people will claim victory at that point, but then they realize about 2 or 3 months later that they're back to square one. The ants are coming back in their homes again. So in order to stop that from happening, it's really important that you treat every 4 to 6 weeks so that when they're rebounding, you knock them back before they get back. That way you're getting a gradual stair-step decline over time. Remember, one treatment is not going to take care of the whole problem. There's no silver bullet for this invasive ant. Pictured here in the bucket, that's an example of the gel bait. Sometimes we'll use powdered beef liver instead of peanut butter. That's what's giving it the brown color. That beef liver is found to be more attractive to the ants, but it is a bit harder and more expensive to get. So peanut butter is perfectly fine. Please remember, though, to use creamy peanut butter. We have had people mix it up with chunky and try to squirt it through the Zep bottles, and somehow it clogs it. Who would have thought? The other picture is our research specialist, Michelle, and she's applying this gel bait into the palm. Surprisingly, the Zep spray bottles can reach 15 feet up the trunk of a tree. Problem is, a lot of the trees that we have may be higher than that. So if you can safely get on a ladder or a bed of a truck, that can give you a little bit extra lift and get your bait higher up into the trees. Don't be discouraged if you can't get it high enough. The ants may come down to try to forage on your bait. One other thing that people will do to try to prolong the life of their bait is to put it in bait stations. But it's important to understand that it's not about how long the bait is out there, it's about how well it's broadcasted. So if you're broadcasting your bait, say we're using a granule, you're say, broadcasting 100 granules throughout an area, and the ants have 100 opportunities to find those. Whereas if you're putting those 100 granules in one bait station, that's one location for the ants to find it. For us in Hilo, I compare it to going to Costco. You know, it's a long ways to get over there, but there's a lot of stuff in that store. Versus we really want to go the convenience store route, so the ants can get to the bait faster. Also, with these granular baits, once they get moist, they're going to start to degrade. The sun can degrade them. So even though it looks like, you know, your bait station is containing your bait and preserving it, it's really not. So it, even if you're leaving it out for a long time, the ants aren't going to be attracted to it after a few days because of that. When it comes to the gel bait, we recommend using that within 24 to 48 hours of mixing, because the water and the peanut butter will start to ferment. Your oil can go rancid. So same thing, if you put that gel bait in a bait station, it's going to be yucky the next day. So it's really a lot more work for not a good payoff. There are a lot of different options when it comes to your 12-month baiting treatment plan. Some people will use only an insect growth regulator of Tango mixed in the Hawaii Ant Lab gel bait. These have good long-term results, non-toxic. You can use it on your edible crops, but you have to have the patience to wait about 3 to 4 months to see a decline in the population. Some people choose to use the lethal baits only. This is fine if you have absolutely no edible crops, and that's not the case for many properties in Hawaii from what we've found. What we do on our eradication projects is we'll use the Tango for 6 months, and then we'll switch to a lethal bait option, kind of a 1-2 punch, kick them while they're down. But of course, if you have edible crops, you would not be able to switch over to that lethal baiting option. The only exception to a lethal bait that you can use on edible crops would be the Antix or the Firefighter. I didn't mention earlier, but Antix and Firefighter both have the active ingredient of spinosad, and that's why it's allowed to be used on a lot of those edible crops. The products themselves are not OMRI certified though, so keep that in mind, but they can be used on your edibles. What we see a lot of homeowners doing is option D, and what that is using the Tango in the trees or the edible crops, and then follow it up a week later with the lethal granular baits on the ground. It's not the most ideal use of Tango, because basically what you're doing is killing off your workforce. And with Tango, you want as many ants as possible, taking it back to the queen so she gets that birth control. But it's for those people that don't have the patience of waiting out the Tango's results. We really got to look at the big picture when managing little fire ants, and remember that one treatment will not take care of the entire problem. You need to bait every 4 to 6 weeks for a 1-year period, and then reevaluate your situation. Maintenance and follow through are going to be your best weapons. I'd like to show you a video of our mixing. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. A lot of times doing the gel bait can seem overwhelming, but we like to compare it to mixing up a box cake mix. Make sure to have a dedicated set of equipment for mixing. So if you're measuring spoons or used to mix up the Hawaii Ant Lab gel bait, make sure that that's the only thing you're making with those items. I also want to point out that in the end of that video, it talked about not applying to the flowers themselves. So these baits are not attractive to the bees, but if you unintentionally apply it to the flowers, the bees go to pollinate and get it on them. We don't know the exact impacts, but it's likely not a good one. So please avoid that. How can Hawaii Ant Lab help you? So we do trainings for industry and residents. We do mixing and application demos. We formulate best management practices for your farms, troubleshooting, and those personalized treatment plans. Even though we have restrictions from COVID, we are still willing to come out to your farms and get you started on strategies for how to survey properties, and then talk about specific treatment plans. So if you are a farmer in need of our help, feel free to contact us. All of our information is at the littlefireant.com website. This is our team here on the bottom. And with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.